The preparation of the European Council, Council and Commission statements, preparation of the European Council meeting of 18th and 19th June 2026, and Council and Commission statements, future of EU-China economic relations. I would like to remind you that for this key debate there will be no speakers list. After the first round of speakers on behalf of the groups, members who received speaking time from their political groups or non-attached secretariat will be called to speak and will be reminded of their allotted speaking time. Please keep an eye on the screens in the chamber where the current speaker and the next three speakers will be displayed. When your name appears as upcoming speaker, I would like to ask you to prepare and make your way to the rostrum. The normal rules regarding blue cards and the catch the eye procedure will apply during the debate. I would also like to remind speakers that, given the test measures currently in place and the fixed end time of the debate, strict observance of speaking times will be required.
To the time to say it also in English, so please understand that.
To kick off the debate, I would like to ask Minister Rauna on behalf of the Council. The floor is yours.
President, honourable members, Commissioner, tomorrow and Friday, EU leaders will meet in Brussels for the June European Council. Against the backdrop of profound geopolitical shifting and continued economic challenges, they will provide strategic guidance on a number of key issues, including Ukraine, the Middle East, European competitiveness, and the next Multiannual Financial Framework. The European Council will send a strong message of unity and determination in support of Ukraine. Leaders will first hear from President Zelensky on the situation on the ground and the latest developments. Moreover, leaders are expected to discuss Russia's continued escalation and ongoing diplomatic efforts. Recent developments demonstrate both Ukraine's resilience and the growing pressures facing Russia's war effort. This reinforces the need for the European Union to remain steadfast in its support for Ukraine and united in maintaining pressure on Russia. Leaders will also welcome the opening of the first negotiating cluster on the fundamentals with Ukraine and with the Republic of Moldova 2 days ago. The Cyprus presidency worked intensively since day one of its presidency and is very proud to have delivered this milestone moment in Ukraine's accession path and in Moldova's accession path. Cyprus, as the member state that continues to experience the devastating consequences of invasion and occupation, has a profound understanding of the importance of upholding sovereignty, territorial integrity, as well as the transformative power of the European project as the best security guarantee, and this unique perspective has driven our work on enlargement as well. This discussion also comes in the wake of the EU Western Balkans Summit in Tivat on the 5th of June, which provided renewed momentum for the enlargement agenda. Against this background, leaders are expected to reaffirm the European Union's unwavering commitment in supporting our Western Balkan partners on their path towards membership. The European Council will return on enlargement and reforms at its October meeting. Another important topic on the leaders' agenda will be the ongoing crisis in the Middle East and the European Union's response. Leaders will welcome the agreement announced between the US and Iran for a ceasefire and a negotiating framework towards a sustained de-escalation across the region. In light of these developments, they will have an opportunity to discuss these developments, assess their implications for the Union, and consider ways forward, while reaffirming the imperative need to ensure freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz and prevent further disruption to global markets, including for energy. Leaders are also expected to call for the full implementation of the ceasefire in Lebanon, a permanent end to hostilities, and full respect for Lebanon's sovereignty and territorial integrity, while reaffirming the European Union's continued support to Lebanon and its people. The European Council will also address the catastrophic unacceptable humanitarian situation in Gaza and the alarming escalation in the West Bank, calling for full respect of international law, international humanitarian law, and reiterating the EU's commitment to a just, comprehensive, and lasting peace on the two-state solution in line with the relevant UN Security Council resolutions. A further key issue concerns the next MFF, where advancing both horizontal and sectoral negotiations has been a top priority throughout the Cyprus presidency. And I am pleased to report that following months of intensive work, the Cyprus presidency has delivered on the new MFF. On the 11th of June, we presented a revised negotiating box with figures. For the first time, leaders will discuss the next long-term budget on the basis of a concrete picture of the financial parameters underpinning the future MFF. I am particularly pleased to inform this House that following yesterday's General Affairs Council, the Council, under the Cyprus presidency, reached an agreement on all three key financing blocks of the future MFF: the NRPP, the ECF, and Global Europe. This represents a decisive step in the negotiations, which brings us significantly closer to our shared objective of reaching an overall agreement before the end of the year. We anticipate that trialogues on the sectoral files will begin as soon as possible. Let me now turn to competitiveness, which has remained central on the European agenda throughout this year and will continue to shape our work in the months ahead. In April, on the 24th, in the margins of the informal European Council that took place in Nicosia, President Metsola, President Christodoulidis, and President von der Leyen signed the One Europe, One Market roadmap, and this provides concrete actions and timelines. And against this backdrop, leaders will take stock of the progress achieved, as well as the implementation of the joint declaration on legislative priorities for 2026, together with the President of the European Parliament, Commission, and here President Christodoulidis will be presenting the main results of the Cyprus presidency. In the current geoeconomic environment, strengthening our competitiveness also requires further attention on the external dimension. Here, as in so many other areas, European unity remains our greatest strategic asset. Leaders will therefore discuss macroeconomic imbalances and other global economic challenges with a view to developing a common understanding of the issues and stakes and provide guidance to the Commission. When it comes to China, our approach remains one of engagement and dialogue, while firmly defending our economic and security interests, which are increasingly interconnected. We must continue to pursue a policy of de-risking, not decoupling, while ensuring a coherent and coordinated response. On other important issues, leaders will address security and defense, including how to maintain momentum in the various strands of work here. Recent months have seen repeated drone incursions in EU airspace, including 2 serious incidents in Romania. These developments further underscore the urgency of advancing Europe's defence readiness agenda and strengthening our collective capacity to address emerging threats. The European Council will revert to migration, ensuring that work continues at pace across all priority areas. The agreement reached this month on the returns regulation, which complements the pact, whose entry into force was recently marked at an informal ministerial conference hosted by the Cyprus presidency, is an important development. Leaders will also devote attention on the challenge of illicit drugs on our societies. Moreover, they are expected to refer to the elections in Armenia, recognizing the efforts of the Armenian authorities to safeguard the integrity of the electoral process amid mounting Russian pressure, and they will take stock of developments following the outbreak of the Ebola virus. The Council will also take note of the Commission's recent communications on islands and coastal communities, which will be presented at a high-level conference hosted in Cyprus by the Cyprus presidency on the 26th of June. In closing, leaders will meet at a time when Europe faces no shortage of challenges. but also the opportunities that present themselves. The breadth of the agenda before us reflects also the EU's capacity to act, to adapt, and to deliver accordingly. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Minister. And I'll have to inform you that since we are now testing the new rules, as you've been informed, you will have only 2.5 minutes at the end of the debate, since you used part of the remaining time. And now for the Commission, let me give the floor to Commissioner Šefčovič. Nech sa páči.
Veľmi pekne ďakujem, vážený pán predsedajúci.
Thank you very much, Chairman.
Marilena, honourable members, good morning. It is a pleasure to discuss with all of you the preparation of the upcoming European Council meeting. So to start with external affairs, the leaders will discuss the EU's continued support for Ukraine, notably the work on implementing the Ukraine support loan, with the first tranche of 3.2 billion euros expected to be disbursed already next week. This follows the 21st package of sanctions and the recent positive developments regarding the accession process for both Ukraine and Moldova. Leaders will also address the latest developments in the Middle East, including with regard to Iran, Lebanon and Palestine. On Armenia, the leaders will discuss the EU support package under preparation in face of the political and economic pressure on the country from Russia. The package will include immediate financial assistance worth over 50 million euros, with further measures under preparation. Leaders will also follow up on the 8th EU Western Balkans Summit on the 5th of June. The Western Balkans belong in the EU, and enlargement is both a geostrategic imperative and long-term investment in our stability and security. Finally, leaders will discuss the need for EU-wide cooperation in our response to the Ebola outbreak following Commissioner Labib's visit to the Democratic Republic of Congo last week, where she announced 16.5 million euros in additional EU support. Closer to home, the leaders will have an exchange of views on the next Multiannual Financial Framework, with a view to achieving the concrete results before the end of 2026. This will be an opportunity to set the conditions for an agreement by the end of the year and to provide a political steer on key issues, particularly the questions of financial equation and the new own resources. Leaders will take stock of our shared commitment to strengthening competitiveness across our Union, in particular on the One Europe, One Market roadmap. Work on the Union's competitiveness starts at home, in particular by lowering energy costs, and to this end the Commission will present the review of the ETS in July, following our orientation debate in the College last week. But it is also imperative that we tackle the external challenges to Europe's competitiveness, such as those caused by global macroeconomic imbalances. Leaders will discuss European defence and security, with the recent drone incidents in the Baltics and in Romania, further underscoring the importance of our efforts in this domain. Work is advancing along different strands, including on SAFE and the Defence Readiness Omnibus. Leaders will take stock of progress on migration, with the Pact on Migration and Asylum being fully applicable as of 5 days ago. Overall, irregular arrivals towards Europe are decreasing. But work should continue to fill any gaps in our procedures to enhance migration diplomacy. And finally, from this part, leaders will call for the effective implementation of the EU drug strategy, of essential importance given the increased negative impact of drugs on European health and security. On China, let me stress that the Commission's overarching approach remains de-risking, as decoupling is neither desirable nor realistic. China remains a critical partner, and engagement and dialogue should intensify, albeit with a clear purpose of rebalancing. Ultimately, our trade and investment relationship must be reciprocal, fairer and underpinned by a level playing field. The EU should also continue its work on increasing effectiveness of its trade defence policy, as well as strengthening diversification, including by making use of the numerous free trade agreements. This is essential for strengthening the resilience of our economy and enhancing the competitiveness of our industry. Mr. President, if you allow, I will stop here, and I look forward into our discussion and exchanges this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Commissioner, and you have even a bit of a time extra left. Now, before the first round of political group speakers, let me just remind you that I have to be strict also during the first round, so please let me give the floor to Manfred Weber for the group of European People's Party, please.
Mr. President, Commissioner, Council, dear friends in the European Parliament, first of all, let me pay respect to the Cypriot presidency. I think what they delivered in the last month is remarkable under the leader of Nikos Christodoulides and also the team represented by you. So thank you so much. You can be proud about this and Cyprus can be proud about this. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, we are living in a moment of time where people feel huge fundamental changes. It's crisis times and people asking us for one thing, and that is to provide security. Our Europe must be a Europe that protects our citizens. And it starts economically with the question of the Chinese economic power in this moment of time. We have a trade deficit with China which comes to 1 billion euros a day, 360 billion euros a year. That is a trade deficit, and that is simply unacceptable. China is flooding European markets with their overcapacities, and that has to stop. We as European People's Party, we stand for free trade, no doubt about this, but we need, as Commissioner said it already, reciprocity, public procurement. When we finance with EU funds investments, it's not understandable why Chinese are benefiting from this if we do not have the same principle in China. We need a level playing field. We have to do this WTO-based, no doubt about this. But we have to tell the Chinese that subsidies are not part of fair trade. We have to be also clear on our sovereignty when it is about critical networks. The next development on 6G network in Europe should be only European network. We have to be sovereign on these issues. And we have to ask also the business sector that please stop naivety when it is about intellectual property rights, when it is about the question of Taiwan. Please be aware that things can fundamentally change. These are the considerations when it is about China. And yesterday we voted on the US deal here in this House. Thanks God we have now clarity, predictability for our business. That's also a chance to restart now. And the G7 meeting in Evian gives us a chance for this, to restart a kind of an economic NATO thinking that together with the Americans we should think about how to answer the economic model of China. There is a global question in front of us, and I want to reconnect with our American friends. Dear friends, that is all embedded in the question of competitiveness, because on the other hand, we have to see that China is a strong competitor. So that's why it's not only about protecting ourselves, but also standing up and investing in competitiveness on European level. The second issue I want to mention when it is about protecting ourselves is the external security, and there enlargement contributes to our external security. Yesterday, dear friends, it was impressive to see that the President of Montenegro, when we speak so much about details of legislation here in this House, he speaks about freedom, about history, about being part of Europe. And these ideas of such a country like Montenegro, of leaders like the President of the country of Montenegro, this new thinking about Europe, this fundamental thinking about what Europe really means, is so important for all of us. That's why congratulations also to the Western Balkan Summit, which was a success, no doubt about this. Also Moldova, Ukraine, we have now the chapters open thanks to the TISA government, the EPP government in Hungary. We have opened it now. And I want to pay also respect to Maia Sandu, because what they are doing in Moldova against the Russian propaganda to show brave leadership is really impressive. And I dream about a 29 by 29, that they really can join the European Union in the next upcoming years. And for Ukraine, one message is also clear, that for Ukraine it's not anymore only a burden. Ukraine becomes more and more an asset for the European Union, especially on the defense issues. So bringing Ukraine close to us is an investment in our security. Ladies and gentlemen, that is on the table for the Council, and We see positive momentum in this moment of time. I want to close with the message that if we want to keep the Europe we love, we must build a Europe that protects. Thank you.
Thank you. And as the next, I would like to give the floor to Madame Irache Garcia Perez for the Group of Progressive Alliance of Socialists and Democrats.
Gracias. Thank you, President. I listened carefully to what Mr. Weber had to say. Any European citizen following carefully might think that for Europe, China is bad, the US is good, to boil it down to its simplest terms. But the world is far more complex. We need to understand that foreign relations, trade and commercial relations are far more complex than that simple message. We need to get serious when we're talking about European sovereignty, playing a key role in a difficult world. That is exactly what we are experiencing. Some celebrate the agreement reached between the US and Iran today. And yes, any move towards peace is good news. But let's not duck the truth. More than 7,000 have died. Citizens or cities have been razed. Millions are grappling with inflation, all to get us back to square one. Some turned a blind eye to illegal and immoral war waged by Trump and Netanyahu. Now we can see what those promises of security and democracy were worth. And so I ask you, where is the democracy promised to citizens of Iran? Democracy cannot be born of bombs built on rubble, nor does it flourish as thousands die. It is grotesque to hear Trump boast of his victory in reopening the Straits of Hormuz. Where is the win there? The Straits of Hormuz were already open before the war began. He's boasting about solving a problem he himself created. We are seeing oil companies rake in massive profits while millions of families pay higher bills, rising mortgages and more expensive weekly shops. So let me ask the European Commission, when are you going to come forward with a proposal to tax windfall profits? We need to learn the lessons here. A European response is to wean ourselves off oil and gas, accelerate the implementation of the Green Deal, invest in renewables. We can see more examples of double standards. European citizens were humiliated when a humanitarian flotilla bound for Gaza was attacked. The Council was enabled to sanction Ben Gvir. We see the same impunity allowing genocide to continue in Gaza. What about the same cowardice shown to the International Criminal Court? Trump sanctioned international justice for judges for doing their job, and you refuse to trigger the blocking regulation. You claim to defend the rule of law, but you abandon it when it is attacked by Trump. This week, we will see things exacerbate even further. The EPP and far right will approve a regulation opening the door for detention centres outside the European Union, black holes where human rights are violated. Mr. Weber, when you visited Pope Leo XIV, did you tell him all about these plans? Did you explain to him that you are seeking to send fellow humans to detention camps in countries where human rights are violated? When the Pope visited Spain, he said that no one can kneel before the Lord and despise their brother. Discrimination on the basis of a person's origin is something that violates the dignity of all human beings. These are not revolutionary words. Christian values, values that you claim to defend while doing deals with the far right and trampling those values underfoot. You are eroding our values. Now, it is difficult to maintain that Christian dignity that you claim to defend. We want to face that key question. Do we want a Europe that bows to others, hostile to migrants, resigned to injustice? Or do we want a Europe that is loyal to itself? True to itself? Social democracy will opt for international rule of law over the law of the jungle.
And now I would like to give the floor to Madame Gall for Patriots for Europe.
Dear colleagues, the Patriot's guiding principle is that EU decisions must serve the people of Europe, so this must apply to the next 7-year budget. The draft budget to be discussed at the EU summit is deeply flawed because Brussels intends to cut funding for the common agricultural policy and cohesion policy. We cannot build a competitive Europe this way. We also reject the increase in funding aimed at expanding EU bureaucracy, the use of European citizens' money for further centralization. Furthermore, we oppose any ideological so-called rule of law conditions in the budget. EU funds must not become a tool for the Commission to exert ideological pressure. Similarly, democracy cannot be strengthened by restricting democracy itself. That is why the new Hungarian government's retroactive, tailor-made constitutional amendment is unacceptable. Its sole purpose is to bar a political figure, Viktor Orbán, from running in democratic elections. This is completely unprecedented in modern European legal tradition. Those who previously sounded the alarm constantly regarding the rule of law in Hungary are now remaining silent. This speaks volumes about this double standard. The leaders of the member states must also be aware that Ukraine's accession to the EU poses a threat to agriculture, to the labor market, and to the safety of our citizens. Yet, they have now opened accession negotiations, even though the most basic conditions have not been met. Just as the Migration Pact, which entered into force last week, is still not the solution, but part of the problem. It does not make the EU better prepared for handling a potential new migration crisis. The Patriots firmly reject this pact. Our position is clear. We must protect Europe's external borders and stop illegal migration in order to preserve Europe's cultural identity and the safety of our citizens. We, the Patriots, want fundamental change for a safer, more competitive and more sensible Europe.
The floor to Mr. Procaccini for European Conservatives and Reformist Groups, please.
Thank you, President. The priority that must guide the heads of state and government at the upcoming European Council is the strategic competitiveness of our continent. But competitiveness isn't created in the offices of Brussels. It's built on the ground, it's fostered through common sense, and it is defended with resolve. This means, first and foremost, changing our approach to the regime in Beijing. Europe must respond decisively to unfair competition, the mismatch when it comes to critical raw materials, and a complete lack of reciprocity that threatens to undermine our industrial base. But we cannot have a proper economy without a strong security framework. This means that we must remain steadfast in our support for the Ukrainian people and maintaining political pressure on the Iranian regime. Security also means being able to defend Europe's borders against mass illegal immigration. In just a few hours, we will cast a historic vote. With the new returns regulation, Europe is taking back control of its own destiny. Those who are not entitled to asylum will be swiftly returned to their countries of origin, while those who genuinely qualify for protection will be welcomed, those who can contribute through their skills and their willingness to embrace our values. For years, the leftist utopia of open borders for all prevailed. The result has been thousands of deaths at sea, the expansion of human trafficking, and growing insecurity and urban decline across our cities. Only a few years ago, when we Conservatives, together with the Italian government and the Council, called for a shift in this House, a shift from relocating migrants within Europe to managing migration flows beyond Europe's borders, we were ridiculed, insulted and silenced by a majority unwilling to listen to reason. Today, a new majority inspired by common sense is on the verge of removing one of the deepest sources of concern for the peoples of Europe. Let us do what is right for ourselves and for the generations that will follow.
Thank you very much. Valérie Hayer, Renew Europe.
President, Minister, colleagues, this European summit is taking place against the backdrop of a peace deal between Iran and the US. It was an absurd war. It has had devastating effects. It has had a major impact on purchasing power. What will happen for Europe? Look at what's happening in the world. Look at Trump and Xi Jinping. What is happening? We have a Cold War. China and the US fighting for power over the world. And Europe must not align itself with either power. We should not focus on interests that are not our own. We should focus on our own independence, energy independence, but also economic, technological independence, and thus geopolitical independence. Dear colleagues, at the next summit, we have to have foresight and vision. We still have a choice, but time is ticking. And when I talk about independence, this is what I expect from the upcoming summit. One, we must no longer be happy serfs. We must work with China and the US. Yes, we must trade with them. Yes, we must defend joint interests, rare earth metals, for instance. But we must not be under their thumb. Never. Not today and not tomorrow. Then we must also continue to support for Ukraine because our own security depends on it. 3, we must speed up our competitiveness agenda as well as our innovation agenda. This is a key issue that came up this weekend. We know that these kind of new technologies are a kind of warfare between Europe, China and the US. We must focus on our own technological sovereignty with our cutting-edge technologies, including AI and forward-looking technologies. For all of this to be possible, we need money. We need a budget. The MFF must be in line with our vision, and we must truly free up European capital. Dear colleagues, you've understood it. If we want to be respected in today's world, then we must show that we speak the language of power. But we must also be clear on our principles, and we must never be brutal. Thank you.
Merci. A teraz poprosím Terry Reintke za skupinu.
Our next speaker, Terry Reintke, on behalf of the Alliance.
2022, Europe faced a dramatic explosion of gas prices after the full-scale invasion of Russia in Ukraine. The consequences were inflation, a cost of living crisis, insecurity amongst our citizens. In 2026, this time Trump started a war against Iran, another skyrocketing of fossil fuel prices, again inflation going up, prices going up, insecurity for our citizens. The reasons are so crystal clear. Our immense dependency on fossil fuels is not only making us weaker, it is making us poorer every single day. Common people do not know how to make ends meet anymore, while at the same time, fossil fuel companies are making record profits. So it is on them. But colleagues, it is also on us. Because instead of pushing for the only logical thing, actually ending our dependencies on fossil fuels, we let the far right and also parts of the EPP run around claiming that all of this is just the problem of the ETS. The ETS and the Green Deal, the plan to build European sovereignty and economic success, are the single most powerful tool to fight against exactly these fossil fuel dependencies. And that is why a green Europe means a strong Europe. And if Europe wants to be a global actor, stand up to autocracies in the world, including China, we have to become world champions in this green future. And I cannot hear all the doom talking anymore, colleagues. Yes, we are in a tricky situation. But if this continent has proven one thing in the past, it is its ability to master crises if we work together. So the time for complaining is over. Let's fucking do this. Let's fight for a green and strong Europe. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I would like to give the floor to Manon Aubry for the left group in the European Parliament, please.
Thank you very much, President. Minister, Commissioner, can you see this Lego brick? This is the only thing left from a nursery school in southern Beirut, bombed to pieces by Israeli bombs. I promised the nuns to come here and to ask why Europe isn't doing anything given these atrocities. And that is why I brought you this part of an Israeli missile that destroyed a center for people with disabilities. Since you refuse to see this, I want to talk about those who I met in Lebanon. Dali, 13 years old, who lost her mother, part of her skull and limbs, and other children who lost their parents in an explosion. What would you say to them, Commissioner, that the EU preferred to dilly-dally rather than to do what it had to do? So many children are injured in Lebanon, even more since the so-called ceasefire of the 17th of April. So why should we believe that this week's ceasefire will be respected? The Israeli army has already bombed southern Lebanon and Beirut. The blood of these children will be on your hands if you do not sanction Israeli ministers and if you don't suspend the agreement with Israel. Then we have the G7 and the European Council. Show some humanity. For 15 days, the children of Lebanon need to start learning how to read instead of having to protect themselves from bombs. Thank you.
Our next speaker, René Aust, on behalf of ESN.
Europe is seeing a wave of violence committed by illegal migrants targeting Europeans. We see that in Halle, Rome. Yesterday, we had a report published on crimes committed by refugees, 200 working-class white girls. That happened in the UK. While the UK was an EU member state, the Commission needs to conduct a Europe-wide investigation into these crimes. This, however, is not being discussed at the summit of EU heads of state and government. We're talking about enlargement and Ukraine. Now, if Ukraine were to join the EU, it would be the largest net recipient in the EU. We want to nurture close trade relationship with Ukraine. We want close ties in future, but go no further than that.
And now for the Commission, Commissioner Šefčovič, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I will, of course, respect the time allocated to me, and I will be very, very brief, but I will touch upon the topics which are most frequently mentioned by the parliamentary leaders, Mr. Weber, Procaccini, Madam Reintke, and Madam Aye, been referring to our forthcoming discussions and the need to rebalance our relationship with China. And I want to reassure you this is exactly the proposal Commission is undertaking, and we would like to base it around a couple of principles. First, we want to have much more regular engagement with our Chinese counterparts to make sure that we will find the solutions, how to reverse what we described also to them, for the unsustainable growing trade deficit between European Union and China. We want to rebalance our trade. We will push for more reciprocity, and of course, we will work very hard with our member states and our stakeholders to put more emphasis of diversification, because we know that all dependencies are very expensive and we paid very high price, especially in the field of energy. What would be very important and what I appreciate in the interventions from all political leaders is the call for unity. Because unity is our most precious currencies. You heard me saying this when I was discussing other strategic relationship with our partners, but I would say in this particular case, this is even more important. If you allow me to respond to Madam Garcia Perez and Madam Manon Aubry, I just would like to underline once again and very, very clearly that we all agree that the EU remains strongly opposed to Israel's settlement policies and activities. They are illegal under international law, they constitute an obstacle to peace, and they undermine the viability of the two-state solutions. And as both Madame Aubry and Madame Garcia Perez recalled, we already tabled very concrete proposals in this regard to suspend the trade-related provisions of the EU-Israel Association Agreement. And we had a discussion on this topic again on Monday among the foreign ministers, where we called for the Council to work on the necessary qualified majority, and I believe that there are the best endeavours from the Cypriot presidency to achieve that result. If you allow, Mr. President, because the debate is rather long, so I would reserve the remaining time for the end of the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you for reserving some time for answering the other things, and also feel free to ask for the floor during the debate so you can intervene and react. Teraz poprosím kolegu.
Now, colleague Mureșan.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Firstly, congratulations to the Commission and the Council for the remarkable progress on enlargement made over the course of the last weeks. This is also the result of the fact that the European Commission has strategically prioritized enlargement since the beginning of its term in office, understanding that the safer, the more stable, the more secure our neighbors, the EU candidate countries, are, the better for the people in these countries and the better also for the European Union. Let us continue to support candidate countries' reform, modernize, become stronger, fulfill accession criteria, and join us as soon as possible, firstly. Secondly, thank you very much to the Cypriot presidency of the Council for the progress made on the Multiannual Financial Framework. It is very good that we now have a negotiating box in the Council, so that Council can also start to make progress in view of reaching a Council's position, as the Parliament already has a position for the upcoming negotiations. The situation is the following. We know what the challenges which Europe is facing are: competitiveness, defense, security, Ukraine, enlargement. The question is whether we are ready to finance these challenges properly. And unfortunately, the message that we are receiving from the Council so far is worrying. We say competitiveness is a priority. Council proposes to cut funding for competitiveness, research, innovation, strategic investments. We say security and defense are important, and then Council is proposing to cut funding there. The Council correctly identifies Europe's challenges, but unfortunately it fails to provide the resources needing to address them. We cannot do more with less. A bigger budget should not be a scope in itself, but a smaller budget
I have to be stricter. I really have to be stricter. Ďakujem a teraz poprosím kolegu Jakiho.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is colleague Jaki.
Thank you very much, Chair, dear Council, Commissioner. Yet again, I have heard here today that we need more green solutions. You can't really listen to this anymore. This is exactly as we Poles remember very well when it used to be, what it used to be like in the Soviet Union. They always said that if we have more of the same solutions, the situation would finally get better. The EU, let me remind you, have implemented lots of green solutions. What results do we have? The industry is collapsing. We've got the most expensive electricity in the world. Even the pearls on the crown, which is the automobile industry in the EU, loses against the Chinese in our own backyard. And you're saying, let's have more of the same. The agriculture is collapsing, and we have an agreement with Mercosur. We've got a more stringent climate policy, and we've got a new CAP with fewer funds for agriculture. Crime is growing. I heard from the leader of the left just a while ago that we are going to introduce a new solution which will make the migrants move to other places where they don't want to be outside the EU. What is the migration pact about? It's about the same, but within the EU. We're going to be moving the migrants to the countries where they don't want to go, because otherwise you know where they would go, the countries where their situation is best. This is hypocrisy. And I need to agree with EPP that Europe wants more security. This is true, but the problem is that we will not have more security without competitiveness if we do not improve our economy. That is why we need to stop ETS, which is crazy and which has brought us to a situation where the participation of the European economy in the world economy is regularly falling. That is why we have to say once again, stop the ETS, and you'll see then our economy will start working. Thank you very much.
And now Mr. Heijn.
Thank you, President. I would like to briefly comment on MFF and the frugal states. We heard last week about what is unacceptable and unaffordable. They want to save money, but what about looking to the future? Some of the frugals only want discussion if they look at reform, but reforms cost money. We need to offer prospects. The world will roll on and not wait for Europe. Everything costs money. What about the hit to the economy? We need a stronger European energy system. That costs money. We know that the global markets are in turmoil. We need European innovation. We need vision. Let's make choices not to cut and sacrifice our future on the altar of austerity. Thank you.
From Madame Bayou, please.
Ik doe hem in het Nederlands even, maar de vraag...
I'll speak Dutch as well. Now, in the Netherlands, we have a cabinet that has chosen to earmark a lot of funding for defence. Can you not recognise that there are other approaches possible here? President, well and good. The Dutch attitude is typical. It creates expectations and that leads to disappointment. If you want to lead, you need investment and that costs money. We need to create a NATO. We need to look at chips, the economy. That's how we create strength in Europe. That's very important in the Netherlands and around Europe. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Madame Oliveira.
President, unlike the EPP, we are concerned about workers' rights, which are not being spoken about at this council. What about housing? What about eradicating poverty? What about improving living conditions? What about support for the productive sectors? None of this is on the agenda of the council. Energy and fuel prices penalise the poorest and make their life more expensive. But there is nothing about this at the summit. And what caused this? The US attack on Iran. And what about a windfall tax on oil companies? You know, we see interest rates going up, we see the cost of living going up, and we see banks making more money. Where are the measures to help people? Instead, there are measures to help multinationals and to persecute migrants. We talk about all these issues, but when will you end the attacks on Palestine?
Thank you, colleague De Masi. The floor is yours.
President, look at Russia's war of aggression, flouting international law. We came up with sanctions. We bought more fracking gas from Donald Trump. But what about the Israel and US attack and their war? What are we doing? Turning a blind eye. What about our relationship with China? For years, Germany has had a high trade surplus, and we defended that trade surplus, saying that it was down to the engineering genius of Germany. Now, I'm sure that there is excess capacity in sectors such as steel, but China has pursued smart policies and critical raw materials, semiconductors. We need to learn from China. We need to recognise that withdrawing the public sphere from the economy does not work. We need to recognise that we have to invest in strategic sectors of the future rather than...
Thank you, colleague Jungploot.
President, no one can grow without democratic control. If we look at the next MFF, that is what they want. There will be growth, but with more flexibility. But there won't be much democratic control. This will shrink. And there will be new taxes introduced, called own resources. And it's good that the Council is pushing back. There is some resistance. Even the German Federal Chancellor is showing resistance. We mustn't introduce these own resources at the current scale. Mr. Weber, you said it's good to have freedom and democracy development throughout Europe. Let me remind you of something. There are going to be elections in Saxony. The AfD has over 40% in the polls, and you will expect that result, I am sure.
Thank you, colleague Nordquist.
Thank you, dear colleagues, Commissioner, Council. The Multiannual Financial Framework is a political statement about what kind of Europe we want. It's up to the pro-European groups in this Parliament to ensure that we live up to this responsibility. When it comes to the green transition, we cannot afford to go backwards. What's proposed by the Council with a 35% climate spending target across the MFF, it's not ambitions for the sake of the ambitions, it's a bare minimum. We already see communities and citizens paying a very high price for the climate crisis. Let, with this coming budget, limit further cost for humans and economy. The same goes for the do no significant harm. Let's make sure it's not just a little box we tick, but actually a tool to ensure the money goes in the right direction. Same goes for rule of law, for our fundamental values. Let's make it count. The overall size of the MFF must be ambitious. A weak budget delivers weak policies. And we cannot cut back when it comes to the green action or when it comes to our most vulnerable citizens and community. They depend on EU investments. Finally, Council, when you sit around the table and negotiate the coming MFF in the meeting, don't forget you have to agree with us in this House. And that also comes on our shoulders, dear colleagues, that we actually look at each other, the pro-European parties, and live up to the ambitions we have for a strong Europe and a strong budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And since I don't see Mr. Terch, let me give the floor to Cotrim de Figueroa. Joao, the floor is yours. Last one surprise, but it happens. No, you don't have 2 minutes. Sorry, that doesn't work that way.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Minister Juan, Commissioner Šefčovič, I only have 1 minute for a very long agenda in the Council, so I'll concentrate on competitiveness to once again ask for speed and urgency. On speed, okay, Europe is moving a bit faster, but the rest of the world is moving at warp speed, and we keep falling behind, basically because we are massively underestimating the gigantic impact of AI in its exponential growth, massively. The events of the past few weeks should be a wake-up call. I'm not sure they were. And this is where boldness comes in. If competitiveness is really our priority, we cannot put AI as a sub point of the Council agenda or a footnote of recycled funds in the MFF. AI should be the main point of the agenda because AI's challenge is essential for Europe and should be treated as an emergency. Therefore, I urge this Council to make bold choices now. Change the MFF to multiply investment in AI and remove regulatory barriers that make it impossible to train AI models in Europe. It is hard, I know. It means making tough choices about the MFF. Some things we like will get less money so that the things we need get more money. It is Europe's long-term relevance that is at stake.
Sorry.
Be bold. There is still time.
Thank you very much. I have to stop you, and you got 7 minutes more because we're trying to locate the next speaker, which is Madam Niebler, which is not here, so we'll wait extra few seconds for Mr. Penele, who is on the way, but he is present. Okay. Yes, I see her. And if I can request the members who are about to speak to be in the room, it would be highly appreciated. Happens to the best of us, but then the risk is that you lose your speaking slot. So, Madam Niebler, the floor is yours. Please be on time next time.
Thank you, President, for your understanding. Commissioner, Minister, honourable members, I would like to talk about Europe's relationship with China, one of the key issues on the summit agenda. We in Europe should not be naive. We need to harness all our potential and tackle new challenges. China is a difficult partner. We see that here in the European Parliament, and our companies back home feel it all too keenly. We heard about Chinese state subsidies and overproduction risking our markets. We want competitiveness and trade, but that must be on fair terms. China also relies on global trade. It needs the European market, 450 million consumers at the end of the day in the EU. Let's not bow down and make ourselves smaller than we are.
You have a blue card. Will you accept the blue card from Madam Garcia Herminda van der Valle?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, colleague Niebler. It must be that I'm sitting in an EPP chair today, but I was really inspired by your colleague Weber's words this morning, because he said Europeans are asking us to provide security, yes, also against China, and enlargement contributes to that security, and 29 by 29. So my question to you is, do you think we can achieve that security in that position without reforming and getting rid of the right to veto in the European Union? And will you join us in that fight? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. We need to allow as many member states as possible to join the EU, and we need to adjust our treaties to that end. We need to look at the veto right in particular. What is key when it comes to the next enlargement is that we consider how we can be more effective in the EU and adapt to change circumstances, respond swiftly when there are changes around the world. And that's a debate we need to have.
Ďakujem pekne a teraz poprosím kolegu Penele.
Thank you, colleague Penele.
Our farmers are used to bad news from Brussels. The CAP budget has been cut, there are free trade agreements, and they've just heard that we will start negotiations for Ukraine to join the EU. Ukraine is an agricultural giant, and there's already an association agreement between them and the EU, and this promotes unfair competition. If Ukraine joins the EU, this would be a complete disaster for our farmers. In the single market, there would be unfair competition when it comes to a lot of products, and they wouldn't meet our standards either. And given the current CAP situation, there would be 20% drop in CAP funds because Ukraine would get the lion's share of the CAP. We now know that agriculture wasn't a priority for the EU, but we now know that they want to kill it off.
The next speaker, colleague German.
Chers collègues,
ladies and gentlemen, Putin is bombing the cathedrals of Kiev, and Franco-German hunting meat is being buried. And we have plants closing down because there isn't enough European funds. And Trump is blocking our access. And Europe is in turmoil because of economic dependence. The European Parliament to put forward a new MFF to defend the space, clean tech, and making sure that these are priorities without sacrificing social issues. But member states are sitting there looking at the Council, and they all want budget cuts. This is terrible. The European Council has to stop this kind of approach, and we've got to make sure that we have proper negotiations and have a discussion that will let us break the stalemate on own resources, because that will help us fund the future of Europe as a continent that will prosper. Thank you.
And now, colleague Eroglu, the floor is yours.
President, Commissioner, at the next summit, we must urgently look at certain business matters. That means our competitiveness. I've heard from many that you have complaints about third countries. Our work as MEPs, as the EU, is to focus on our own matters, not on third countries. During the previous term, there were many errors made by the Council and Commission that harmed our competitiveness. Now we have the right path forward. Competitiveness, competitiveness, competitiveness. And we saw during Corona that there was desperation for a vaccine. And Europe came up with that vaccine. We are the ones that drive innovation. We are the ones who work with passion to solve the world's problems. But that only happens if we have a level playing field with China. And if we protect ourselves from Chinese subsidies. We need to get that in our heads. We need to unleash our power. But if you continue with this planned economy, then we will be submerged.
Thank you. And now, colleague Van Overtveld.
President, Commissioner, Minister, colleagues, the West fundamentally misunderstood China. China pursues a simple but effective strategy: dictatorship at home and coercion, deception and protectionism abroad. We were blind, believing that economic liberalization would lead to political freedom. Instead, China used its WTO accession to perfect a pattern of dominance, dependency and blackmail, designed to drive out competitors. China's economic model is built on protectionism, massive state subsidies, massive theft of intellectual property and currency manipulation, aimed at dominating strategic industries, such as, for example, now electric vehicles, not to save the planet, but to gain economic and geopolitical leverage. With mounting internal problems, China will double down on export-driven growth, targeting Europe. We need to react to that decisively. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, colleague Farantouris. The floor is yours.
President, Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, many of the social problems in Europe are worsening social cohesion. And these social problems are accentuating social disparities, and many of these problems stem from international crises. I'm thinking of energy poverty, the cost of living crisis, high food prices, the housing crisis. All these problems are compounded by international crises in the Middle East, Africa, and eastern borders and other parts. Where is Europe? We need strong diplomacy, and we all have to fight hard for a strong diplomatic and geostrategic mark on international institutions to fight for peace and stability. And unfortunately, this is lacking. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Colleague Becke, up next.
Thank you, President. Ladies and gentlemen, Commissioner, protecting our citizens must be our top priority. We can all agree on that. The over the last 5 years, our defence budget in Europe has doubled from 200 to 400 billion. The bad news is that we don't have a European pillar within NATO, and we don't have progress on paragraph 7. We need more progress here. I know that the European Council will look at these matters, look at the Schengen Treaty and take an example there, come up with a defence treaty, include Ukraine, Norway, the UK. Let's make progress with a coalition of the willing. Priority has to be protection of citizens. Let's roll up our sleeves and get to work.
Wonderful. From Madame Garcia Germinda van der Velde.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. How wonderful to hear the EPP give such an impassioned speech. Talk about a European Defence Union. Yes, that's wonderful. Let's work together to that end. An integrated defence union with all EU member states. But yes, let's start with the willing. You've heard me correctly. My proposal, and I'm the only one to come up with that, although the Federal Chancellor mentioned this, and we heard that from the Defence Commissioner as well. You heard Mr. Kubilius talk about the need for strength. We need to work together. We need a coalition of the willing.
Thank you very much. The next speaker, colleague Martens.
President, Commissioner, you want unity. Unity for what? To applaud for Trump, a man who has made millions off the back of this war, a war which has strengthened Iran and which has led to the closing of the Strait of Hormuz. And even more power to Israel. Look what it's doing in Lebanon. We're in a situation that is worse than before. Should we applaud the ECB, which is raising interest rates, which will cause a cost of living crisis in Europe or worsen it? You ask for unity against the people that we should be defending ourselves against. And Israel is not on the agenda. Cyprus was hit by an Israeli missile, wasn't it? For 10 years, we have done nothing. We have done nothing on the association agreement for the last decade. Will you continue to play the background music? It's like the music that we heard on the Titanic when it sank.
Thank you. Next speaker, colleague Bloss.
That since we have even more requests for the KHDI than we can accommodate, which is great to hear, but sadly that means that not all of you might be able to speak. I'm closing KHDI. So Mr. Bloss. He's not. Oh, we lost Mr. Bloss. No, I don't know where he disappeared. Okay, then Madame Montserrat.
Gracias, Presidente. Thank you very much, President. Thank you, Commissioner. A single market, common defence and single rule book. There is no other way, but we need to speed up and we need to go further. We have to be pioneers, and if we don't do this, otherwise, as Draghi said, the death agony will be slow and painful. We need to speed up the single market, we need Thailand highways, and we need to make sure that it's not just about trade, it's about power and geopolitics. Secondly, security. The European Defence Union isn't ideological, it's about survival. Ukraine is proving that Russia can be beaten, but Putin will be more dangerous as he feels weaker and weaker, and Romania sounding the alarm bell, and we're not listening. We need to make sure that we help Ukraine in its path to Europe. If we want the EU to be respected on the global stage, there has to be respect within the EU. Spain is the fourth largest economy, but there is so much corruption, and it hasn't really had a proper budget for 3 years. It doesn't fulfill its defense commitments. It tramples on the rule rule of law, and it strikes deal with enemies that jeopardize our future. And then we have this mass regularization of illegal migrants when we've just pushed through the Migration and Asylum Pact. The Commission cannot remain silent, because otherwise millions of Spaniards will be wondering what else needs to happen. Has the Commission not learned its lessons from Orban's Hungary? Commission, if there is no political authority, there is no citizen trust. And without citizen trust, interruption by the chair.
The next speaker, colleague Van Bremt, the floor is yours.
Thank you, honourable colleagues. I am somewhat confused by the EPP's key message. Yesterday, they approved an agreement with the US. So we now have a deal with the US to develop a strategy on China. I think that's a foolish idea. We need to draw on our own strengths in dealing with China, and that is very important. We see that China is focused on exports, on key technologies in our industries. They're looking to take over our key industries, place our businesses under pressure, and that is bad news for many workers. We need a clear strategy. Trade defence, industrial accelerator acts. We need to work hard to ensure up our own sovereignty. We need to look at an overcapacity mechanism that needs to be rolled up very quickly. We need to make progress with this strategy. Thank you.
Will you accept a blue card from Mr. Smith? Mr. Smith is over there on the right side.
Which language?
In het Nederlands, in Dutch.
Dankjewel.
Dat zal lukken, denk ik. Hè?
I think we'll manage with Dutch. I was curious to hear you talk about our growing reliance on China, but the Green Deal is spearheaded by your group, the S&D, and that is what has led to our reliance on China. We have been flooded by Chinese technology. What is your thinking about this excess pace that has been forced by your group? You've not really considered strategic autonomy or getting our own house in order first. Thank you, Mr. Schmidt, for that very important question. In the S&D, we are proud of the Green Deal. We really see this as a competitiveness deal that will help to reduce our reliance on critical raw materials, fossil fuels and the like. There is no future for our industry if we cling to fossil fuels. We need to ensure our own sovereignty, and critical raw materials are key here. We now have a Critical Raw Materials Act. It must be implemented. We need to look at our own recycling industry. Thank you.
Colleague Canfin, the floor is yours.
Colleagues, Commissioner. Last year, for the first time, all European countries had a commercial deficit with China. Even Germany. For the first time, last year, we imported more Chinese cars, more machinery and tools than we exported. No European economy, including Germany, is protected from the Chinese tsunami, which is arriving and which is eroding, which is destroying our industrial fabric. We must protect ourselves and we must invest in innovation. China's market share is growing. Why? Because of subsidies, because of unfair trading practices, but also, let's admit it, because they have invested more than we have in recent years. We have to win on two fronts, one on the investment front and on the level playing field and on protection. I think things are changing in Germany, which will allow things to change. And I want the Commission to take an offensive stance on these matters. The Chair cuts off the Speaker.
The time is up. Yes, I have to be strict, Pascal. Even 4 seconds is over, 4 seconds too much. And now I'd like to give the floor to Madam Joanna Wojciechowska.
Thank you. I am part of the delegation for relations with China, and I was in many meetings and many discussions. I think you did not understand that at the moment China is the biggest economic force of the world. It is also part of BRICS. BRICS has 49% of the GDP, international GDP. And you, instead of wanting to collaborate and to have a dialogue and diplomacy with China, how many times there were meetings? All you did was you asked about Taiwan, which is a complete lack of respect towards the Chinese state and a complete lack of diplomacy. If we were to think about how many Taiwans there are in this world, then maybe we would never have a united Europe. It would be better if you were interested in the relations of European Union with China. You shouldn't get involved in the internal affairs of a state which do not concern you. More than that, you refuse dialogue while all other countries trade with China. You accuse them with no reason because, unfortunately, the European Union, and the speaker was interrupted.
Now, colleague Borchia.
Intanto in bocca.
Well, good luck to the heads of state and government. They are called upon to find solutions at the upcoming European Council. Best of luck, because at the moment, apart from slogans and buzzwords, we don't have really heard about real solutions. We've got the socialists and the EPP sparring. I didn't expect the socialists doing this. It's true that we've got the World Cup at the moment, the football cup, but I didn't think that they would be athletes and that they would be supporting the Pope and talking about human lives. If that's the situation here in the Parliament, then best of luck. Now, the returns regulation. I know you don't like it, but I think you've got to come to terms with it, because at the end of the day, even if it's not a perfect text, it is a first step to help us move from a quantitative approach to migration to a qualitative one. People are in a real bind, and we need a parliament that works hard and comes up with specific solutions. Thank you.
That's on me. Poprosím paní.
The next speaker, colleague Repasi, the floor is yours.
President, Commissioner, honourable members, we need political action. We have a trade deficit with China. If we have trade distortions, let's increase customs. If we need quotas, let's introduce them. If products infringe EU law, then let's ban them from our markets. We want European tax to be invested in European jobs. Let's come up with a Made in Europe label. These instruments are available. Let's use them rather than talking in fine words and using rhetoric without action. We recently travelled to China as part of an EP delegation. Let's tackle the challenges. We need innovation. If we really want to stand tall against China, then we need to bank everything on research and development. So we can't cut Horizon. Council, you're wrong there. It should be where we spend most our money on research and development.
And now colleague Pereira.
Senhor Comissário,
Commissioner, colleagues, the debate on China is all too often reduced to false choices: cooperation or confrontation, openness or protection, dialogue or firmness. But Europe doesn't need to tie itself to these binary choices. It needs a strategy that reconciles these. China is our largest import partner and the third biggest destination for our exports. So yes, we do need to have more dialogue, but we can't have dialogue from a position of vulnerability. And we know to what extent European industry depends on value chains involving China. But it's not one-sided. China needs access to our market, so we need to make the most of our economic power and clout to ensure a level playing field for European companies. But this power and clout only counts if we speak with one voice. Sometimes member states visit China in search of bilateral agreements, and then China hears 20 different voices, but no one is strong enough on their own to impose themselves and be respected. Europe is stronger than the sum of its individual parts. We are our union. And let me speak directly to our Chinese counterparts. Europe is not seeking confrontation, but a fair relationship. But such a relationship cannot be built on pressure, but on trust. And this must be mutual trust. You can't demand this. You earn it through respect, reciprocity, and clear rules. Thank you.
Mr. Oliveira.
Okay.
Yes,
Sure.
okay. Please.
Obrigado.
Ms. Pereira, we strike deals with China, but these deals destroy our clothing industry, our footwear industry. The Portuguese industry is being destroyed. You don't care about protecting Portuguese industry. But then, when it's the German or Italian industry that is at stake, then there are protective measures taken. What about the interests of Portugal and smaller countries? What about the interests of those countries? Thank you very much. Explain to me. Explain to all who have voted how a country like Portugal with 10 million people, how could we strike good trade deals with the rest of the world on our own? What makes the European Union so strong is that we have this weight. We have 450 million consumers behind us. That's a big enough size and scale to make our voice heard and respected on the international scene. And yes, let me tell you that Portugal is doing much better in the EU, much better than 40 years ago when we weren't in the EU, when we were isolated because of a dictatorship.
Questions because we have lots of catch the eye, so if we fit all together, it's a bit more fair. Thank you very much for understanding. Mr. Ruijsen, please. No. Yes. Got disoriented.
Thank you, President. Honourable members, migration is one of the items on the agenda for the upcoming summit. Quite rightly, the Asylum Migration Pact may have entered into force. We may get a deal on the returns regulation. However, we're nowhere close to getting migration flows under control. What we now need to do is deliver on pledges made. Border countries must stop allowing asylum seekers to travel onwards in Europe unscreened. Rejected asylum seekers must actually be expelled. We need returns hubs outside Europe. When it comes to asylum applications, should we not also consider a far more burning issue, whether certain cultures or religions are compatible with Europe? Genuine asylum seekers do need a safe haven, but Muslim countries should step up when it comes to Muslim asylum seekers. President, if we don't take action, the new Asylum and Migration Pact is also doomed to fail.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Irache Garcia Perez has unfortunately left us, but her speech reminded me a little bit about this story of this driver on the motorway who listens to the radio and hears a warning about another car dangerously driving in the wrong direction. And this driver looks around and says, "One, I see loads of them." And this is the story of the socialists today. Spain was the only country that voted against the return regulations. 3 socialist leaders were in favor of it. More than 20 of your own colleagues supported it. So maybe it's time to consider also that they might not be the crazy ones here. And thank you also to the socialists for invoking the Pope and Christianity. You should do it more often, is what I recommend to you, but do it less selectively, perhaps. Invoking the Pope when it politically suits you while ignoring him on everything else is not faith, it's hypocrisy. President, 3 small points on the summit this week. First, on Ukraine, it's crucially important that we support Ukraine, but also here we see that it's a small number of member states that are doing most of the supporting, while others, like Spain, again, contribute little to nothing. This is unacceptable and cannot continue. Second, on defense, there is still a gap between our strategic ambition and our operational delivery, and that gap must be closed. And third, on drugs, we need action against third countries that harbour drug traffickers. Criminals like Bollejos in the Netherlands should not be able to escape justice simply by finding protection abroad in a country like Sierra Leone. We need to prepare to use all our leverage. Thank you.
There are even 2 blue cards for you. Madam Moreno Sanchez, and Mr. Goncalves. So let's start with Mr. Moreno Sanchez. Sorry, you the first one.
Okay, thank you. Senor Lenners.
Mr. Lenners, do you think you could have been born in Kabul and you could have been a woman? What do I mean? It means that you have respect those people who want to improve their lives. Yes, we need returns, but they have to be done with dignity to safe places on the basis of agreements and not the way that the right and the far right are putting forward. So I'm sorry. Please make sure that immigrants are dealt with dignity. I am a son of immigrants.
Well, thank you for the question, but then I would really recommend also you to read the return regulation that you vote on this afternoon, but that's exactly what it is, to return people to places where there is safety, where there is dignity, upon agreements with countries. And I know that for you politically, this is difficult because you rather have not returned anybody from the European Union to their countries of origin or anybody else. But for us, it's a matter of also taking responsibility to make sure that in Europe, we can take care of those people who actually are in need of international protection.
And there is a second one from Mr. Goncalves.
Thank you very much. I'll speak in English. It will be easier. You don't need the headphone. You have mentioned the Pope, you have mentioned the socialists, and you have mentioned migrants. It couldn't be anywhere else. I want to mention probably two things. The first, Aristides Sousa Mendes. You could remember this name. A Portuguese that helped thousands of Jews getting into a safe harbor, not less than a century ago. And the second mention is to the Pope. You have asked us to agree more with the Pope. Pope, on his final day of the Spain visit, said the following: all of us are migrants. Do you agree with the Pope?
Thank you.
My point was that we should not use and invoke the Pope selectively, as the socialists here did today, while ignoring all the lessons he does, but selectively quoting him in certain issues. And I fully agree with the Pope. We have a duty to take care of all people, regardless of where they come from, regardless of their faith or their position. But with charity, and this is also important, with charity also, in my faith, with charity also comes responsibility. Responsibility to have an organized systems where we mainly take care of those who really need it.
Thank you very
much.
much.
At the same time, strict to those who come.
Thank you. Sorry, I have to. Teraz poprosím paní kolegyňu Gregorovou.
Colin Gregorova, the floor is yours.
Let us be honest about who we are dealing with. When China wants its leverage, it weaponized rare earths, choking the supply of materials our industries, our defense, and our green transition depend on. When we moved to reform our cybersecurity, Beijing threatened our businesses. The pattern is always the same. Cooperation is offered when we are useful, and pressure is applied the moment we act in our own interest. We keep answering this with dialogue. They answer with coercion. And a partner who only respects strength will keep pushing until they meet some. So we should make their divide and conquer tactics carry a real cost. We should impose tariffs where China dumps and distorts. We should make access to our markets strictly reciprocal, and we should pursue China through the WTO when it breaks the rules and deindustrializes the European Union in the process. China's state-run economy is in desperate need of export markets. The US has closed theirs. We are the only large and rich pillar left. If we don't use this immense leverage and instead let a few large companies relocate,
Thank you. I really have to be strict. I switch off your mic. A teraz poprosím pani
The next speaker is colleague Blinkevičiūtė. The floor is yours.
Vadovų tarybos susitikime daug dėmesio bus skiriama konkurencingumui. Tai svarbu. Tačiau neturime pamiršti, kad Europos stiprybė visada rėmėsi ne.
The Council, the summit is upcoming and they will be talking about competitiveness and defence, but we can't just look at economic indicators. We also need to look at the European social model. We're talking about one Europe, one market, and we mustn't forget that the EU can never be built while neglecting workers and their rights. More competitiveness also means more investment in people. The problem we're grappling with is that even when people have a job, they can't afford to own a home, they can't save, they can't plan for the future. We need to have an ambitious agenda for high-value jobs so that employers throughout Europe have fair wages, collective bargaining, social protection on an ever-changing labour market. That is not a burden for us, but it is our basis.
The next floor, colleague Madeshan.
We're about to adopt a historic regulation that will allow us to expel illegal migrants more effectively because of a right-wing alliance. It is with great satisfaction that I state this, but we mustn't stop fighting against illegal migration. The next big project is to deal with legal migration. We know that there has been an increase in the migrant population. They account for 64.2 million people, almost the same as metropolitan France. And in the EU, 3.5 million initial residence permits were issued to third country nationals. So the Council has the obligation to put an end to family reunification and to curtail the right to asylum and deal with visa waivers. There are too many of them. And then, of course, there's a Spanish government that is taking the whole Schengen area hostage by this mass regularization of migrants. These are the issues that need to put on the agenda of the European Council.
For you, from Mr. Germain, will you accept it? Will you accept the blue card from Mr. Germain? Yes, please.
It's in French. Madame...
Mrs. Maréchal Le Pen, Mr. Bardella, your colleague, said recently that France had to reduce its contribution to the EU budget to decrease it twofold. I presume you agree with him, so my question is straightforward. Where do you want the cuts? European defence, the digital sector, space, investing in clean tech, the CAP. The French and the Europeans have the right to know. Thank you. I'm not called Jordan Bardella. My name is Marion Marshal Le Pen, as you know. But if you're interested in the whole issue of migration, I can give you more arguments to convince you, because the EU really has to look into this issue, because this is about our civilization. It's security that's at stake. It's about terrorism, the economy. And therefore, I would like to invite you to look into this and maybe ask Jordan Bardella the question next time.
Doing follow-ups now because we have too many requests for Catch the Eye. I'm sorry, it would be massively limiting it. Mr. Barna, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I share the enthusiasm around the new accession negotiations, and I congratulate the Cypriot presidency for opening the first cluster for Moldova and Ukraine. But let's not kid ourselves with this patting on the back on social media. Enlargement is crucial for the security and the relevance of the European Union, but it's not enough to pay lip service. We need to step it up with concrete measures. We're racing against the time, and delays make us vulnerable. Beyond political promises, we need resources. The reality is that without a proper MFF targeted for enlargement, we cannot build a larger and more united Europe with tentative budgets. This is why my message is clear. Leaders need to embrace a more courageous vision based on individual performance. Drop your blinkers where you only look at one term in office. The speaker is interrupted.
Prosím kolegu Della Valle, nech se páči.
Colleague Della Valle, the floor is yours.
Thank you, President. the upcoming European Council will be another failure, the umpteenth failure, especially when it comes to peace, zero diplomacy, arms and infinite war in Ukraine, a failure when it comes to the economy, high energy prices, no investment, and difficulties for households and businesses. In a multipolar world, Europe should talk to everyone and be a bridge between the East and West. We use the BRICS countries and China as our enemies in order to please the US that want a clash to stop their decline. Let us look at the reality in the face. Trump humiliated us when it comes to tariffs and the whole issue of Russian gas being replaced by liquid natural gas from the US. That is pushing us towards recession. To see China's strategic rival and to kowtow to the genocidal government of Israel is folly. So replacing masters with new masters. We Europeans need leaders that will protect our interests, and you're not doing that. Thank you.
Ďakujem a teraz poprosím kolegu Vilimského.
Thank you. Colleague Vilimsky, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we tend to ask whether the EU is banging its head against a brick wall. And we can ask that question when we see the EU opening negotiating clusters with Ukraine. It is a country at war, embroiled in corruption. Millions of euros and dollars have disappeared into a black hole. There have been no elections for years to lend democratic legitimacy to the government. The EU is going beyond the pale. Ukraine may be a long-term option or a medium-term option for enhanced partnership as a partner, but the idea of pulling the Ukraine into the European Union is mad and it should not happen. Thank you.
Is Mr. Javier Moreno Sanchez for 1 minute, please.
Gracias, Presidenta.
President, ladies and gentlemen, peace, dignity, human dignity, all of those should be central planks of the Council conclusions. Peace in Ukraine and the Middle East. But we must do it together with Ukraine. We are providing unshakable support and financial support, including a 90 billion euro loan to Ukraine. We must also play an active role when it comes to ending the illegal and absurd war of Netanyahu in Lebanon. We must be firm, because otherwise the peace deal that was signed a few days ago will go nowhere. Let's also look at what's happening in Gaza and the West Bank. They, in Israel, have introduced the death penalty for Palestinians, which we must end. We must rebuild this devastated part of the world. Only if we do this will we have a two-state solution. The only path forward towards long-lasting peace is through a two-state solution.
So precise. The next speaker is Mr. Ludwig Niedermayer for 1.5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. Let me just react on 3 points on the Council agenda. First of all, on Russian aggression. Ukraine is showing strength on the battlefield every day, but it wouldn't be possible without continuation of our economic, political and military support. And we must be going, not only because it's right things, but as it was said by our chairman, a relationship with Ukraine is not liability, this is assets for us, and we must act accordingly. The second on enlargement, just keep going. What we were doing so far is not enough. We must conclude negotiations with some Balkan countries that are prepared for the membership and work out a plan how to develop quickly much stronger relationship with others that for strategic reasons need to join. Last not least, on competitiveness. One Europe, one market is a great plan, but we must deliver. Deliver only not on small things, but especially on large things like the electricity market, banking union and so on. But at the same time, leaders should understand that it's up to them to improve the market by removing the obstacles that were created on the member states level. Unless we do it, this agenda will not be complete and will not deliver. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Mr. Bloss for 1 minute, please.
Liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen,
colleagues, President, Commissioner, imagine every day you lose €1 billion. And what are you going to do? Shore up the combustion engine even more. That's China's policy. Every day we spend $1 billion on imports from China. And as I speak, we're already giving them the next $1 billion. We all export more to Switzerland, more than we do to China. And just think about the relative populations of those two countries. What's more, every day we lose industrial jobs. And some blame climate policy. The rest of the world is forward-looking, and you are looking for a scapegoat. That's very conservative. I want to have a European industry that survives. I don't want it to be consigned to oblivion in museums. So while we must wake up and invest. Thank you.
So, dear colleagues, we have now reached Catch the Eye. I have more than 20 requests, and I only have 10 minutes to distribute. So, as you can understand, not everyone will be able to get speaking time. So what I do is that those who have been present here during the whole debate will be put before the others. So that's my ruling, so to speak. And I will therefore begin with Ms. Banjak, Nicolina Banjak, seat 269, please.
Colleagues, the European Council is going to be very important about the new European budget, which will actually be decisive on what kind of Europe we want in the next decade. We are facing war, global competition, as well as the technological race, and we have to work on our resilience competitiveness. So we cannot really finance our priorities by 2030 with the budget from the last century. We have to include transport, energy security, defense, and other issues. We cannot speak about the strengthening European competitiveness without allowing for all member states to tap into funds. The experience with Horizon clearly goes to show that 90% of the budget is used by only 6 member states. It is an illusion to expect that this will make the European Union competitive at the global level, and we need to achieve economic balance, because only if the competitiveness fund is available to everybody we can speak about the competitive Europe. Thank you.
Very much. The next speaker will be Mr. Lopez Aguilar, seat 316, please.
Madam President, Commissario Šefčovič.
Commissioner Šefčovič, when all the agencies and indicators show that less people are arriving in Europe, and when after 2 years we have the binding legislation in the Migration Asylum Pact coming into force, we're about to adopt a returns regulation that flies in the face of all of this. Not only does it give back the possibility of member states contacting governors of third countries for detention for unlimited time of prisoners in then detention in return hubs, then we also have this flying in the face of other regulations. And not only is this being done, but it's also being done in a way that violates the Charter of Fundamental Rights, that protects everyone, not just Europeans, but asylum seekers and third country nationals. So this flies in the face of European law.
Frustrating for everyone. The next speaker is Mr. Sander Smith, seat 510, please.
President, Commissioner, the Green Deal has left Europe reliant on Chinese technology and subsidized goods. That has cost our industry and strategic autonomy heavily. We need gas exploration and European nuclear energy. What will the Council do? What about Chinese support for Russia and dual-use goods? What about the situation in Ukraine? In the Middle East, we hope for peace. But what about fertilizers and their prices in the short term? How can we ensure affordable fertilizer for farmers? The talks on the MFF will be key. Let's stop attacking fishers and farmers. Commissioner, we also need progress on the returns regulation. It is time for action, time for returns. We cannot waste another minute. Thank you.
The next speaker is Mr. Barry Andrews, seat 140, please.
Thank you, Madam President and Commissioner and colleagues. I just want to talk about the debate we've been having about China. I was on the Trade Committee in the last mandate, and we put an awful lot of effort into developing a whole raft of trade defence instruments around anti-dumping, FDI screening, the procurement instrument and anti-coercion, among a range of other things. And we appointed a Chief Trade Enforcement Officer. And yet, here we are today. And it strikes me that all of these measures that we put so much effort into are not being effective. We introduced tariffs on EV subsidies from China. And in Q1 2026, we saw an 82% increase in imports of EVs from China over Q1 of 2025. So I think what we need to do is, yes, we're doing great on trade agreements. It's brilliant to have an agreement with India, with Mexico, with Australia. But on our trade defence instruments, we need to resurface the assumptions around these instruments. We need possibly to have an omnibus on this to make sure that they are actually effective, because they haven't been effective in the last few years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. van Lansroth, seat 56, please.
What's the definition of madness? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. According to that logic, the European Council is insane. Every time a wannabe dictator is finally voted out, another one pops up. And so we're held hostage by 27 national elections and national vetoes. The Council is kind of like the Greek myth Sisyphus, who pushes a boulder up a hill, but every time he's near the top, it rolls back down, repeating for eternity. Seizing the frozen Russian assets, almost there, veto. Making the European elections more democratic, almost there, veto. Abolishing the veto, veto. This Friday, Volt protests in front of the Council to demand national leaders do what most Europeans want. Abolish the veto and unite. And we will do this over and over again until we push that boulder over the top. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Mr. Suido Alvarez, seat 755, please.
En el siglo VI,
many centuries before BC, it was said that you had to be cautious and balanced when cooking a fish. And we have to have balance when it comes to EU and China. We're not looking for a commercial war, nor do we want to close our market. We want to have a stable and mutually beneficial relationship. But at the same time, we have to predict problems before they happen and prevent confusion. It's true that there are major imbalances in our economic relationship. Overcapacity, subsidies, critical dependencies which endanger our industry, and a lack of reciprocity which is having a major impact on our businesses. These asymmetries are not sustainable. We want dialogue, yes. We want cooperation, yes. But we want fair rules and clear rules.
And the next speaker is Ms. Alice Teodorescu-Move, seat 674, please.
Gjorde vi oss beroende av rysk gas och nu av kinesiska metaller.
Thank you very much. We've been depending on Russian gas, and now we depend on Chinese metals. We have to put an end to this nightmare. China controls 90% of minerals. And of course, this has an impact on the whole issue of cars, diesel cars, petrol cars. So it means that we're depending on the country that emits the most greenhouse gases in the world. We're becoming more and more dependent on China because we want to maintain our image when it comes to the environment. We have to be realistic. We need competitiveness and economic security, but we need a sea change in European policy, and we need to make sure that we have the right priorities. Thank you.
Thijs Reuten, seat, let's see, 52.
Thank you, President. I want to talk about 2 points on your agenda, Ukraine and defense, and they are connected by the lack in sense of urgency. I'm sorry to say that, in particular with the member states. There are many good things in the draft conclusions, and you will say to me, yeah, look what we are doing. But condemnations of Russia's attacks don't save lives. Air defense, deep strike capability and integrated air protection zone do save lives. So how many heads of state and government have been called by von der Leyen, Kallas and Costa in the past 10 days? Because we've sent letters about it. We asked, call them, send these air defense systems to Ukraine. And the second point on defense. Also, no lack of good words in the conclusions. But where is the sense of urgency? Member states continue to spend money with nationalist reflexes. No internal market on defense, no collective procurement, wasting tens of billions per year. I want now sense of urgency. The member states are holding us back out of fear for what? 27 capitals are endangering our security. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Sebastian Tynkkynen, seat 210, please.
Arvoisa puhemies.
President, Europe is under China's thumb, and this has been Europe's own doing. This continent, which at one time determined the direction of the economy in the world, is now light years behind China in virtually every strategic sector. This is a huge security risk. Let's take a few examples from weapons technology. 85% of battery production capacity is located in China. 90% of processing of rare earth minerals is controlled by China. Both are, amongst others, the backbone of drone and counter-drone systems. 9 out of 10 alignment sensors and optical systems come from China. In its green frenzy, Europe has outsourced its production and made itself dependent on supply chains that it does not control. Our future must be taken out of the hands of dictatorships. The one and only solution is to ramp up the European production.
Is Mr. Grasulis, seat 525, please.
Gerbiami parlamentarai, viena didžiausių ES problemų yra.
Well, we all agree that the biggest problem in the EU is unfettered migration. Currently, we have over 62 million migrants in the EU. I cannot agree with the left that a migrant entering Europe is not bound to abide by our laws. Just 10% of the European population is migrants, but they're accountable for 30% of all crimes. Member states need to be able to send these people back. Of course, we need to ensure that they are sent back to safe countries with a familiar culture for them. We need to look at migration and how it damages our labour market and our culture. And so I welcome the vote today.
495, please.
Bardzo dziękuję.
Thank you very much, Chair. There will be no sound economic relations between the EU and China without equal competition rules. And I will just give you one example. Each day, there are around 12 million small packages sailing to Europe. It's as if every day one inhabitant of Cyprus, Portugal, and Malta got one package. At the same time, the trade deficit is around 1 billion euros a day. Additionally,
China takes away from us around 500 jobs. This is not statistics. It is the account for lost production, lost investment, and lost jobs in Europe. It's not about online trade. It's also about cars, domestic appliances, and other sectors where European companies have to compete with not only other companies, but the whole state system of support. We cannot be naive.
So I only have 2 slots back left, and the next speaker is Ms. Maria Grappini.
Minister, Commissioner, I notice again that you have a very charged agenda, but the European citizen does not find himself on it. We talk about competitiveness, but we do not see facts. We have a fragmented single market. Commissioner, I said it before. How can you introduce higher customs duties on raw materials than on finished products? How do you want to have an industrial policy in this way? We see the Council blocking the directive for late payments. I asked for a regulation. We have blocking because we asked for a regulation on public procurement to take up SMEs as well. Nothing is happening, actually. You talked about the conflict with Russia and Ukraine, but what are you doing for Romania and for other states which were attacked by drones? You are not talking about protection, security of citizens and about economic development and indeed strengthening the single market. This is what we're talking about. And the message going out to the citizen creates a lack of trust. Citizens must be placed first.
Is Mrs. Estelle Keulemans, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Madam President, this week the Council will have to validate its position on the future MFF, and what is on the table is concerning and even unacceptable. For the first time since the Treaty of Rome in 1957, the European Social Fund will no longer have specific allocations, and we are talking about a cut of 60%. Yet social issues are key, especially when it comes to internal security. In Porto, the Council, the Commission, and the Parliament and social partners adopted an action plan on the European social rights. 5 years later, we're backsliding and not honouring our commitments. Europe urgently needs to find its social compass again and put it straight, to put an end to poverty that affects 1 out of 5 Europeans, especially children, and make sure that all women and men can access quality jobs, affordable housing, and proper health care. You have to make sure. Interruption by the President.
We are under time pressure. So now I will give the floor back to the Commission and Commissioner Šefčovič. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam President, Madam Minister, honourable members. First, let me start by appreciating the way how the plenary is running under the new pilot rules. I find the debates more lively, I find the attendance higher, and I think it's good for European democracy, and I will of course consult my colleagues before sending Commission's observation on this new scheme under the revised framework agreement in my capacity as Commissioner for Interinstitutional Relations and Transparency. But thank you very much for this new way. And I also would like to reassure you that I listen carefully to all your remarks, suggestions and propositions on Middle East, on migration, on agriculture issues, and of course on China. And we'll come back to this important issue after discussion of the leaders in the European Council, and of course after my meetings with my Chinese counterparts, which should take place in the coming weeks. In the second part of our discussion, most intervention will also focusing on MFF, Multiannual Financial Framework. And I would like to highlight that the Cypriot Presidency Negobox preserves the modernisation that has guided the Commission in our MFF proposals. We need to preserve a high level of ambition for our next budget, and I know that we share this ambition together with his House. The key issue would be how we would finance our policies, and for that we need new own resources, and I know that also on these very crucial issues we can count on the support of this Parliament. And if you allow me, Madam President, to conclude by thanking Cypriot Presidency, to Minister Auna, dear Marlena, but also to your outstanding team for excellent results brought by your positive, I would say, sunny Cypriot energy, but also by outstanding personal relations you built across all the institutions, because this is how we managed to get across the finishing line a lot of very important pieces of legislation and achieve the progress which is so important for the European Union. So I would wish you good luck for the next 2 weeks, and thank you very much on behalf of the European Commission. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. And now I will give the floor to the Council and Deputy Minister for European Affairs, Ms. Rauna, please.
Madam President, honourable members, Commissioner, thank you for outlining your positions, your suggestions, which will be relayed to the President of the European Council. Allow me on two specific items. On enlargement, 2 days ago, we delivered what appeared impossible. 3 IGCs in 1 day, the third one for Montenegro under the Cyprus presidency, the long-awaited second accession conferences for Ukraine and Moldova. This was a clear manifestation of EU unity and a reflection of the fact that these candidate countries delivered in the most adverse of circumstances, because above all, enlargement is a merit-based process. On the MFF, the Cyprus presidency delivered a decisive step on the road to the agreement, which is a shared responsibility. With a moderate cut of 2%, this is a basis for negotiations that upholds modernization and it upholds ambition across all priority areas. Given that this is my last plenary, allow me this. It has been such an immense honor and a privilege to stand before this House representing the Council, the Cyprus presidency. Thank you. The Cyprus presidency made it a priority to work closely and with transparency with our co-legislator, the European Parliament, and I thank you wholeheartedly for this cooperation. And we were guided by a clear vision to be a results-driven presidency. This is what we have done, delivering results across the broad spectrum of the EU agenda for a union that is more autonomous and open to the world. President Christodoulidis' leadership is what drove this presidency from the beginning, what inspired it, having made it a national mission. It is also this leadership that is driving forward an ambitious national agenda and a foreign policy that is expanding Cyprus's diplomatic imprint well beyond our geographical expanse. The European agenda is also our national agenda. Thank you to my team. Thank you to the European Commission for the cooperation, to this House. Cyprus stands proudly European, and for 6 months we have flown the European flag proudly and high. Thank you very much.
Also, a very big thanks to you, Deputy Minister, for your presence and your work here. So, now the joint debate is closed, and I do thank you for your patience. I know that some of you did not get speaking time, but I did give it even further than the 10 I promised. But this is how it is, and I hope for your understanding. Thank you very much. And then we go to the next item on the agenda, and that is the Commission statement, protecting children's safety and mental health from the risks posed by social media, our duty to act now. I would like to remind you that this key debate, there will be no speakers list. After the first round of speakers on behalf of the groups, members who receive speaking time from the political group or non-attached secretariat will be called to speak and will